Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, I'm Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. Imagine you invented a set of tires, these amazing set of tires, and they were ridiculed. That is precisely what happened to a vet from Belfast, Ireland. This vet named John Boyd Dunlop watched with a bit of apprehension as his son Johnny bounced madly while riding a bike on the cobblestone street. The solid rubber tires were clearly not suitable, and so Dunlop sets about inventing the first commercially viable pneumatic tire. But then they made fun of him. They called the pneumatics pudding tires. We know that Dunlop didn't give up. He didn't give in to the ridicule, but persisted instead with Irish industrialist W.H. Ducrot. And they created the Dunlop Tire Factory both in Ireland and across the world. And even then, that Dunlop Tire Factory didn't quite take off. As the story goes, Ducrot had to fight, he had to scheme, he had to graft before the pneumatic tire was finally accepted. But what if Dunlop and Ducrot simply gave up? In hindsight, it's easy to see that the decision was right. But how were they supposed to know back in 1888 that things would turn out just right? Is there a way to know what makes ideas succeed? And why do great ideas seem to fail? This series is about the validation of ideas. And we will explore 3 chunky bits that are important when you're about to embark on a pudding sort of idea. And here's what we'll cover. The first thing is how to distinguish between your own voice of fear and the voice of reason. The second is how to go about validating your idea to give yourself the best chance of success. And third, tips for getting over analysis paralysis. Let's start with the first one, which is how to get over your voice of fear and listen to the voice of reason. If you buy really well-made bread, it goes through a cycle. At first, it's delicious. It's likely to be crusty on the outside, soft on the inside. But keep it on your kitchen bench for a few days, and it starts to get hard. In a week, it's likely to get rock hard and possibly get moldy as well. The question to ask yourself at this point is, did you buy bad bread? And the answer is self-evident. The bread wasn't bad, was it? But if you take the best loaf of bread made by the most dedicated baker and you keep it outside for days, you're going to get an almost identical result. This is true for good ideas as well. No matter how great your idea happens to be at the start, the hardness will set in, and so will the fungi. Good ideas can't be left on the bench. They need to be consumed right away. However, this is where things start to go horribly wrong. It's the part where we start to get uncertain. It's this testing that we have to do, this research, working out if the market needs our product. But once we've gone around the research block many times, we then wonder if we have anything new to bring to the table. As we're doing all of this evaluation, the market marches on. The more we research, the more we get stuck in our own trap. And there is a point where the only thing we can do is to scout for yet another idea. So fear takes over, and we don't know what to do next. But why are we fearful in the first place? We're fearful because we can't see the big picture. When you look at most business owners, they don't look confused, they look very composed. They seem to have all these projects going. They appear at different events, they're speaking, they're turning out courses, they're turning out books, they're turning out software. In short, they seem to have everything well under control. You, on the other hand, aren't able to see so far in the distance, let alone figure out a way to get there. And it's this lack of ability to see way into the future, plus the ongoing intimidation from seemingly successful people, it puts you in a position of great angst. The big picture is usually the biggest problem. Entrepreneurs who succeed rarely see the big picture. They're not entirely clueless either, but they know where they're going, and still it's very hazy. It's this hazy view of the future that they have. What they tend to look at closely is what's in front of them. To understand the analogy, think of yourself in a car. Let's say you have to drive from two cities, say two cities in New Zealand, like from Auckland to Wellington. It's a route of almost 8 hours of hard driving. Do you know what Wellington looks like at this moment? It would hardly hassle you because you're focused on the road right in front of you. Your only piece of research is a sort of GPS system that will more or less ensure that you don't get lost along the way. But wait, you already have your GPS system. You did the research, you read the books, you know how to move forward, so why are you stuck? If we were to go back to the road analogy, you wouldn't be stuck. And that's because you're not figuring out whether you'll have a puncture 24 kilometers from now. You're not worried about the other drivers on the road who technically are your competition. What you're entirely focused on is the road in front of you. If you get tired or confused, you stop for a break. If you get hungry, a meal does the trick. All along the way, you're just looking at what's in front of you, which is completely the opposite of what you'd expect when you're starting with a project. A project somehow needs to have all the ducks lined up in a row, or we simply drive around in circles. But what if there were a way to break up a project into smaller bits? When we think of a project, let's just drop that big $1 million, 7-figure silly plan, shall we? Let's just focus on two core elements. The first point is where we're going to get our clients, and the second is where we're going to get them to spend their time. So what's the first thing, which is where do we get our clients? If you just build a website, no one will come. Despite being online and having a rock-solid reputation, almost no one comes to the Psychotactics website out of the blue. Instead, they come from somewhere else. When we first started our business back in 2000, that somewhere else was a portal called marketingprofs.com. We'd publish an article at the portal, and then clients would come to our website after reading an article. When we'd go to a local tiny event and we'd speak for about 30 minutes, prospects would turn into clients and they'd buy an ebook. And then a small percentage would sign up for consulting or something else. In every instance, what you're doing isn't this big long-range planning. All you're doing is this tiny task. Successful entrepreneurs are like successful comedians. You look at a comedian and you say, well, they're all so well put together. You see this amazing 1 or 2 hour show that they have on stage and you go, wow, that's amazing. But you never get to see all the small parts along the way. Comedians show up in small bars, small events, and they painstakingly put forward their jokes. Many of these jokes just fall flat, and they never make it to the final show. Entrepreneurs do something similar. They make a move here, a move there, and they keep going forward. By the time you see that fancy course appearing on Facebook or on their websites, they have made dozens, possibly hundreds of little moves to get to that point. And then, if they're good, as in really good, they keep working on their plans and refining it to the sharpest possible degree. The road in front of you isn't that scary. When you consider the entire journey, the possibility of a breakdown, deteriorating weather, crazy drivers, suddenly it seems like a pretty good idea to stay home. Just put some tea in the boil and just stay home. But with every experience of staying home, you create a whole new layer of fear. After a while, it seems totally impossible to go ahead with any plan, and research and further research and more planning seems to be the only way out. Or at least that seems to be the only way out, but it's not. Let me tell you a personal story that I've told many times before. I know how to create an EPUB file. How do I know this? Because I've been through many hours of practice. When EPUB first came out many years ago, I was keen to learn it, and so I followed the tutorial and I made an EPUB file. But it was a dummy file because I didn't want a client holding that file. So InDesign started to dig deeper into EPUB, year after year, version after version, and to this day, I haven't created a single psychotactics document in EPUB. You can see the problem, can't you? I'm trying to create the perfect book, this perfect product. Instead of simply planning out a simple EPUB, I'm looking at the big picture. And it's stifling me. All the information and all the research, it's not helping at all. The EPUB project is many years old and like a loaf of bread that's been sitting on the kitchen bench the whole time. It's very hard to believe this information, isn't it? You think, what's the problem with a simple EPUB file? Why can't you just give it a shot? Who cares if it turns out right or wrong? You can fix it later. The same question is headed your way. Who cares if the idea is right or wrong? How about taking on this tiny project and conquering the fear? And if it fails, we'll figure out a way to fix it. But if we don't start, we know that the idea will get harder by the minute. Even so, it would be nice to know how to validate an idea, so that we give ourselves the best possible chance of success, so that we don't just struggle all the time. Is there a way to validate an idea? Let's find out in the next section. Can you think of a TV series that has generated over $3.1 billion so far? If you answered Seinfeld, then you're perfectly right. Except for one little fact. Seinfeld almost didn't get off the ground. As author Adam Grant mentions in his book Originals, two entertainers got together to create a 90-minute special. Despite their abilities, they couldn't find enough material to fill that 90-minute special. So they decided to create this half-hour weekly TV show. And that's precisely where all the trouble began. The TV networks looked at the script and they thought it was terrible. Undeterred, these two, they went on to create the pilot for the series. 100 viewers dissected the strengths and the weaknesses of the show. The majority of the test audience decided that they wouldn't watch such a show. But a test audience in one city may hate the show and others may love it, which is why the pilot got screened at 4 diverse cities. So now you had 600 people that watched the show. And the results were, yes, dismal. They all thought it was something that they'd never watch again. And at that point, the series, Seinfeld, should have just simply died. And it might have, if it weren't for one network executive. This executive was very persistent. He said, no, let's make 4 more episodes. Let's air 4 more episodes. The drama didn't stop there. Seinfeld, the series, lurched back and forth, always threatening to tip itself into oblivion. But this is the story of history. When we go back and we look at people who are trying to look at good ideas, they don't know what they're looking at. And it doesn't matter how talented you are. Let's look at Johann Sebastian Bach. He's considered to be one of classical music's superstars. He wrote over 1,000 pieces of music in his lifetime. Bach, Beethoven, they composed so much music, and yet, despite their voluminous body of work, they were as unsure as you and me about what would work. If you look at Beethoven, he thrashed the final movement of his most celebrated work in the Fifth Symphony. Only later did he decide to put it back. Could he not tell that it was an amazing part of the musical piece? But he couldn't, and throughout history, experts have failed to spot the super things, the superstars. J.K. Rowling, the Beatles, Elvis Presley. History has hundreds and maybe possibly thousands of examples of bad calls. And it's not like the crowd does better. Despite what you hear about the wisdom of crowds, the crowds are pretty hopeless at it as well. Which is why Seinfeld's early episodes got panned so badly. If everyone is guessing, how are we going to validate an idea? In this podcast, we'll cover 2 ways to validate an idea, and they're both reasonably bizarre. The first way is to do no testing at all with audiences. Instead, you go to your peers and they tell you with greater accuracy which idea is going to work. The second way is to create anything you jolly well please, but then link it to an existing problem. Let's start out with the first way and figure out which group tends to be more accurate than others. When we sit down to create a product or service, we instantly realize that we're not alone. If you're in marketing, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of books on marketing. If you're in health, fitness, nutrition, programming, illustration, it doesn't matter what you pick, it's all been covered. It's at this point that we feel the need to stand out and to fit in as well. There's a reason why we need to fit in. If we go too far away from what everyone else is doing, it might not be viable. Novelty is hard to cope with because we don't know what to make of it. If you ask an expert, they don't see the world as you do. Back in the early 2000s, as we started up an earlier version of Psychotactics, there were already solidly entrenched marketers such as Jay Abraham, Dan Kennedy, Brian Tracy. They were all well established in the field of seminars. They delivered their content through massive bookbinders and cassette tapes. If all of these methods of delivery sound archaic to you, it's only because we're looking back in time. Almost no marketer wanted to explore the internet. It's the very entrenchment that causes you to see something new as a novelty. It's a blind spot. If you were to ask the experts or the audience, you still wouldn't get validation, that validation which you seek. But there is another group that seems to understand the novelty factor a lot better, and they're called fellow creators. Fellow creators in the very same field have a sense of what's going to work long before the audience or the experts do. When peers evaluate each other, they are twice as accurate as anyone else. When Justin Berg, assistant professor of organizational behavior, studied circus acts, he found that the ones who best predicted whether a video would be liked, shared, or funded were when peers evaluated each other. As a cartoonist, I know this to be true. When one cartoonist sees another great cartoon, the instant reaction is, I wish I thought of that joke. One of the greatest compliments that you can get isn't from an audience of experts, but from a group. Yes, a group of, say, fellow cartoonists or fellow comedians or fellow creators. Peer judgments, when evaluated in groups, are more reliable because they see the very same idea through different eyes. So the first thing you've got to do is to seek out your peers, people who are in the same field and approximately with a similar mindset. Yet that's just one way to handle validation. The other way is not to validate at all, but to create pretty much what you please, and then to line it up to an existing problem. Let's take a company like Tesla. What product is Tesla making? If you look at their car manufacturing, you're likely to say they're building electric cars. But electric cars aren't a new thing. They existed long before the gasoline car. We're going back 150 years. They still failed repeatedly. But apparently Elon Musk, who's the CEO, doesn't care about the failure because he's not building electric cars. If you pay close attention to Musk, you'll notice that he harps a lot about the speed. The car accelerates from 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. You see the problem? There is a problem, isn't there? He's not drumming the save the planet message, is he? Instead, he's building the car of his dreams, and then he's tackling the problem of speed. He's tackling the problem of distance. That car can go faster and a lot further than the car you're driving. It doesn't matter how great your car is. That car is built for speed and distance. That's what gets you. That's the problem he's solving. If you happen to sit in a Tesla, notice what the owner tends to drool about. Speed and distance. Which tells you that if you just build a product, they will not come. But if you link the product to an existing problem, you can instantly attract attention. And even if we were to go back to Domino's Pizza, which has been repeated hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of times, you'll notice the same thread. They just wanted to create a pizza using their own method. Is that a feasible or viable way of succeeding? Of course not. But marry it to a problem and you see what happens. The problem was the client was hungry, and hence the pizza needed to get to the customer's place as soon as possible. The customer was hungry. Within 30 minutes or less, the pizza would get across. And that was the problem that they had to marry it to. It wasn't a great pizza. It wasn't a fancy pizza. It wasn't a vegetarian pizza. It was a pizza that needed to get across very quickly. That was the problem. They solved the problem. At Psychotactics, we have a bizarre product. It's called The Secret Life of Testimonials. Now, this has got over 100 pages, but it's a product that I wanted to write about, and so I did. But where is the problem? We found out quite by chance that better testimonials get us better clients. Clients that respect our work, they pay in advance. And so the problem is crappy clients. You see what's happening when you launch a product? You're trying to make the product or service fabulous, and so it should be. The Tesla, Domino's Pizzas, The Secret Life of Testimonials, they all have to be solid products. But that's not enough. What if it doesn't sell? It won't sell if you simply talk about the obvious. In every instance, whether it be the first car, the first plane, the first trip into space, they're all beyond the imagination of the audience. However, the moment you link it to an existing problem, you immediately get their attention. So when you think about it, what makes a viable product? And how do you validate it? If you're into testing, find a group of your peers. Your peers are big fans of the profession. A group of chefs that evaluate another chef's work are more likely to know accurately which dish will be a hit than just a group of diners who frequent the restaurant. But on the other hand, if you care two hoots about testing, go right ahead, create your product, create your service, and then find an existing problem. When clients get excited about your product, you know that you have a winner. One last word about how this validation bit works. For years, I wanted to write a book about how to teach more effectively, and it's called Teacher versus Preacher. But who's interested in such a book? So how did I go about validating if someone else is interested? Well, I did an informal evaluation with others who teach online, those who do courses, workshops, webinars, etc. These groups are likely to be clients, but they are primarily a group of teachers. They really care about their students. They don't just want to sell a course or home study version of their product. They want their clients to be able to get the skill. Like everybody else, they want their courses to sell out, they want their workshops to be successful, they want all that stuff, but their bigger focus is to be able to transfer the skill to their students. And when I bring up teacher versus preacher as a concept, they love the idea. So on the one-to-one front, that's validation. But what if I wanted to write the book anyway? In such a scenario, I'd write it, but then I'd connect it to a problem that we at Psychotactics solve so well. Though our courses are higher priced than most people on the internet, we can sell them faster than practically anyone else that I know of. A $3,000 course sells out in 30 to 60 minutes. And if you've been watching, we do this repeatedly, usually with one email. And other marketers, they spend weeks of endless emails, of affiliates, of joint ventures, just to get any traction. So that's the kind of problem the book solves, doesn't it? It enables you to get people to come to your courses and workshops without doing all this pounding, so that you can then transfer that skill. And so in this potential example, you've seen how that idea can be validated. You can go to your peers and you can ask them, and then they get all excited like, I wish I could do this. But the second way is to link it to an existing problem. And in this case, the existing problem is that it takes too much time to sell out everything. So the existing problem has nothing to do with the product itself. It's a different problem. Yet the audience is instantly attracted towards it. And this is the point that you have to linger on, that the problem doesn't need to be connected to the product itself. It can be completely different. You have to connect the two. And that's how you validate a problem. These two methods are pretty obscure, pretty bizarre, in fact, but when you use them, they're very effective. But we're still stuck with the third factor, and that is the problem of analysis paralysis. How do we get over that major hurdle? How do we deal with analysis paralysis? This podcast has gone on for quite a bit, so let's do that in the second part. But what did we cover in this session? What we covered was how to distinguish between your own voice of fear and the voice of reason. The voice of fear looks at the complete journey. It looks at all the possible punctures along the way, all the accidents, all the traffic. It looks at everything. And there is no way to predict all of that stuff. And the voice of reason, it says, well, we've got this journey and we know approximately where we're going, but let's focus on the road right ahead. And that's the voice of reason that you need to listen to. You need to cover the distance, just like you do every trip in your car, on your bicycle, when you go for a walk. You don't consider the end point. That's nice. It's there. It's hazy. It's cool. But you have to consider what's in front of you. Just today is what matters. And you do that bit, and that's the voice of reason. And the voice of fear is completely bizarre. It's stupid. But you can use it to your advantage. Get things done bit by bit. So that's the first thing that we covered. The second thing is validation of your idea. And we looked at two bizarre concepts. The first concept was that you had to go to your peers. Don't go to an audience. Audiences don't know. They're never going to know. They never shall know. But if you go to your peers, they will say, wow, that's a cool idea. I wish I did that. That's what you're looking for. A great idea from your peers. The second thing that you want to do is go ahead, create your product, create your service anyway. But then find a problem. The problem doesn't have to be linked to the product or service itself. When you look at the secret life of testimonials, we're not solving that problem. We're talking about getting better clients. I don't know if you noticed, but there is no great connection between them. You make the connection. When you look at Tesla, when you look at the electric car and the problem that it's solving, it's a huge problem. Every car on the street is just adding to the pollution. Everything is going into your lungs. That problem can be solved. Imagine walking down the street and having no pollution. What a novel idea. But is Elon Musk going down that path? No, because that's not the problem that we want to solve. That's a nice problem, but we don't care about it. What we care about is range. Electric car owners have this factor called range anxiety. Pretty much like an iPhone that runs out of battery, except now you've got a big car in the middle of the road and there's no way to get some person to recharge that car. So they have range anxiety, and that's what he's talking about. They have this factor that my car can already go fast, but the Tesla can go faster. And that's the beauty. The beauty is that the problem is not connected to what's being sold. And that's how you can create your own product, but then link it to a problem. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in psychotactics land. If you've been listening to the last few podcasts, you realize that we have had to make space. And what does this space mean? It means that I've had about 16 projects that have been lined up and have been postponed year after year after year, including probably that EPUB project that we were talking about. And what I've had to do is make that space. All these years we've been doing these courses, and yes, they're selling very quickly and they're filling up and they generate $70,000, $80,000 every time we do a course. But the point is that we have to make that space. And so for at least the next 10 to 12 months, starting now, we're in April 2017, so up to April 2018, we're not likely to be doing any courses. But shortly after that, we will bring back the article writing course and the headline course, but that's in probably the second half of next year. I mentioned there's not going to be anything till 2019 in the last podcast. Well, there is going to be something in 2018. We'll see how it goes. The cartooning course, however, continues to roll out. The cartooning course will be in this year and the next year. So look at psychotactics.com/DaVinci. If you think, I can't draw a straight line, you should see some of the people who said that and how good they are. Because that's what we do with psychotactics. It's not information, it's skill. That's what's important, skill, not information. You already have enough information. So that's the first announcement. The second is just this topic about pricing. I was talking to my friend Johnny Nastor in Canada, and Johnny was interviewing me about this book, Dartboard Pricing. Now, it sounds like just a pricing book, but it really shows you how you need to use these three gorillas. There are three gorillas that enable your product to stand out from everybody else. And that's in the Dartboard Pricing book. It sounds like a book. It's actually a 3-part series. Check it out at psychotactics.com/trustthechef. But don't type trust the chef. Just type psychotactics.com/TTC and you'll get there. Pricing is such an important factor. We've increased our prices consistently, and you can see how to not just increase your prices, but have a system to do so. And a system that will not fail you. You will not lose clients when you raise your prices if you use this system. It's very simple and you can use it. Plus there's other stuff like how to create your product sequencing. It's a lot of strategy, a lot of really good stuff that's probably underpriced in this book. So that brings us to the end of this podcast, which unfortunately I've had to record thrice. The first time, the guy next door started mowing his lawn, and I said, okay, fine, let's go ahead with it anyway. We'll clean it later. And then he brought the lawnmower right next to the studio. So I had to do that one again. Then I woke up this morning, and the stuff that I'd done it all crashed. I hadn't saved it. And so we did it for the third time. And I hope you enjoyed this, because we're going to have the second part of this podcast, which is the paralysis analysis thing. Well, that's part 2 of this podcast. And you can get the transcript at psychotactics.com/137. That's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now. And we'll see you in 5000 BC. Bye-bye. Are you still listening? Well, yesterday, what I started to do was I started to drive my BMW i3 around. Now, you know that's an electric car. It's not exactly a Tesla. Tesla is not a real thing. It's like a monster. It's like a machine. It does stuff that normal electric cars can't do. But anyway, I looked at the dashboard and I saw that we started out with 104 kilometers. Now, with the car, it goes down, right? It goes 103, 102, 101. And my goal was to come back home after doing like a circuit of 7 or 8 kilometers and seeing that 104 still there. So it's as if the battery hadn't depleted at all. Now you think, how's that possible? Well, the electric car recharges. If you drive in a certain way, it recharges. And that's been my game. My game is to go on a trip of 7 kilometers and come back with exactly or a greater charge than when I set out. And yesterday I did that. I did 7 kilometers. And so I should have gone from 104 to 97 or something like that. But I came back at 104. I was very pleased with myself, as you can tell. And that's it from Psychotactics Land. Bye for now.